Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining the Equal Hope segment on CAN TV. My name is Leilani Lacson, Soltiziak, and I'm glad that you can join us today. For those of you who don't know who Equal Hope is, we are a nonprofit organization in Chicago whose mission is to help alleviate health disparities in Chicago, and we do this by offering free services such as free cervical cancer screenings, mammograms, assistance with vaccinations, linking people to primary care providers for free, and much, much more. You can learn more about us on our website at equalhope.org or give us a call at 312-942-3368. You can also find us on social media. We have Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and we also have YouTube too. Find us at equalhope_IL. We also wanted to mention that we'll be doing something really special for Breast Cancer Awareness Month this October. Stay tuned and keep checking our social media, equalhope_IL. And you will learn more information and see how you can get involved with this special event that we have going on. So it's back to school for most children and teens. Here to talk with us about back to school health is this month's guest, Dr. Felicia Scott-Wellington. She's an adolescent medicine attending physician, assistant professor of clinical pediatrics, and co-director of the Department of Pediatrics DEI Task Force in the Division of Adolescent Medicine at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Dr. Scott-Wellington has also been on a radio show in the past to talk about pediatric health. Thanks for joining us today on our show, Dr. Scott-Wellington.
Thank you for having me.
Whether it's a young child starting school and separating from parents for the first time, or an older child entering a new grade, the start of a new school year can often be stressful and anxiety-provoking for children, teens, and their parents and caregivers. Back to school is also a time for parents and caregivers to check on their children's health, mentally and physically, and to establish healthy routines to set them up for a successful school year. To have a great school year, kids need to stay healthy. Healthy students are actually better learners. So let's get into it. Dr. Scott-Wellington, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. So as you already mentioned, I am one of those doctors that most people have not heard about. I'm an adolescent medicine specialist. And so I trained in pediatrics, so I have been trained in like the realm of all pediatric care, but I did extra training to take care of adolescents and young adults ages 12 to 25. And so that's who I see at the University of Illinois at Chicago.
Great. So going back to school can be stressful no matter what age, and it's never easy, especially if you've had 3 months off. Tell us how parents and caregivers make the first few weeks of school an easy transition.
So it's funny because right now we call this like physical time in our clinic, right? So most people who do primary care, pediatrics or whatever, we're seeing a lot of people trying to get back to school to get their physicals. And so what I find is that a lot of times the family unit has to be prepared. So if the parents are nervous or anxious, that kind of like spills onto the kids, or vice versa, right? And so a lot of times I end up having conversations not only with the kids, but also the parents. So I say, okay, so you're getting ready for 9th grade. You're getting ready for whatever big year this is. You also have to make sure that whatever your worries are or your nervous energy is, that you aren't, putting that on your child so your child is worried about. Like 9th grade is such a big deal, right? Okay, but they're calm. They're not worried about it. I just saw a kid today that's going away to college. He's going away to a different state. And like, to me, I was like, are you ready? Are you going? And he was like, I haven't even thought about it. I'm going to wait till I get there, right? And of course, you don't want your kids not to be prepared, but you also don't want to make them so nervous because we're so nervous. And so I've been doing a lot of counseling, not with just the teens and the young adults that I see, but also to the parents. Like, it'll be okay, take one step at a time. Not everything's going to be perfect. Expect some hiccups, and that's okay. What you're showing your kid is how to pivot, to the next thing, just in case, anything arises.
So for youth and adolescents, what do you tell them, especially because it's a time when they're really self-conscious, they want to fit in, and they want to be cool?
Yeah. So it's funny because a lot of times people come to us asking, like what to tell the adolescents, but a
Hmm.
lot of times, like I said again, it's the family unit. So the first thing is that the generation of teens that are going to high school and college, they're different, right? And so all the things that a lot of times our parents told us not to worry about, like, oh, it's school. Don't worry about what your friends think. Don't worry about what
Hmm.
their friends do. That was shut off from us when we got home, right? So we weren't able to connect on TikTok or social media and all the
Hmm.
rest of that stuff. And so kids are very connected in that way. And so a lot of times, what I tell parents to do is engage with their kid, right? So if they're on social media platforms, if they have hobbies, just making sure that they engage in their kids. So if there's a lot of negative energy coming their way, whether that be from social groups, at school or social media, that we're able to kind of like take them away from that space that's not being so positive. And so if you know that your kid is a person that likes to be outdoors or likes to eat or cook, and they're spending a lot of times in this space that's not positive for them, pull them out of that and allow them to do things that they enjoy. So that's what I really do, is just trying to make sure that you do a check-in on your kids,
Hmm.
and reminding them of the things that are unique to them, that are good about them, and kind of just re-energizing them and putting back that positive energy into their lives, because sometimes there's such a disconnect that we forget to do that, especially as
Yeah.
the kids get older.
Yeah. So how can schools ensure an easy transition?
Yeah, so I think it's a kind of a holistic approach, right? So teachers being aware, trying to make sure that as they have new families come into their classroom, new students, so especially transition years like kindergarten and junior high, so going into sixth grade, going into ninth grade, that that everyone, that all eyes are on board. So families are aware, and that teachers are aware in the school as well. And I, on my end, as a doctor talking to my patients, I do a lot of like prep work with them. I go, okay, so you're going into ninth grade. Do you know anybody from your old school? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? How about if you don't know anybody in your school and you want to connect with one of your old friends? Do you have a way to talk to your old? Because there's sometimes things that they don't think about. They're like, old school, good riddance, I'm over it, right? But I was like, but how about if in the beginning you're trying to find somebody that you connect with? Do you have anybody that you're still connected to?
Hmm.
And so it's a two-way street. I talk to the parents to make sure that they're checking in with their teachers and their schools and their principals, but I also talk to the children too, to make sure that they are just kind of preparing themselves to the best of their abilities.
It seems like you provide some great counseling and tips.
Yeah, I try.
So let's talk about vaccinations. Why is it important for children and teens to be up to date with their vaccinations?
Right. It's so funny because I used to get this question a lot, before 2020, and it was all like making sure that people aren't infecting each other, getting each other sick. But to be honest, a lot of the childhood vaccines that we vaccinate against, many people aren't seeing anymore, right? So like, when's the
Mhm.
last time someone saw somebody with measles or mumps? And so that spiel of vaccines are to protect you from getting sick, like it
Mhm.
became like this thing that parents would say yeah to. But then COVID came, right? And so people saw it real life, like, no, vaccinations actually do help as a whole to protect people from getting sick. And so I really have different conversations now that people have lived through a pandemic and seen the fact that we can get each other sick and disease can spread, and that vaccines can protect against that. And so that's really what I tell people, like, okay, you've been here the last 3 years living through the pandemic. And so we really got to make sure that your child stays up to date. For parents that had to take their kids out of school, right, because the school closed, they actually see it differently now. They're like, okay, I need my kids to stay in school, right? Like, I
Mhm.
want them to be able to integrate back in school. And so if you recommend this vaccine, I'll ask you questions about it. But these are the things that I now see and know and believe in now. So the conversations, I feel like, are different.
What are the vaccination requirements these days? Because I remember when I went to school, we had a whole list of vaccinations we had to have in order to attend school.
Yeah, so it's the same. So there's as I said in the beginning, I'm an adolescent medicine doctor, so
Mhm.
I see 12 to 25, but
Mhm.
I'm a parent of two younger kids. So I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. So I have a
Mhm.
newly starting kindergarten. I'm so excited. And so before my daughter got registered for school, they were like, you need these mandatory vaccines
Mhm.
before you can even start her into kindergarten.
Mhm.
So those kind of like milestones still exist. So you need vaccines to get into kindergarten.
Mhm.
And then there's kind of like these check marks along the way. So the next time that they kind of like check your shot records again is probably fifth grade. And so
Mhm.
from kindergarten until fifth grade, having your yearly doctor's visits to make sure that they stay up to date on their vaccines. And then again in ninth grade, so from fifth to ninth. So I always tell people, even if your child is not sick, because a lot of times they're like, oh, they're sick, I didn't bring them in. Make sure that you come in every year to get a checkup, to make sure that everything's okay. And then we can update your vaccines. Because what you don't want to do is have eighth grade going into ninth grade or 12th grade graduating, and there's like 5 or 6 vaccines that you might have missed, because the children are upset, right? They're like, oh, I missed all these vaccines. And you know what else is also great? When they come in and it's like 13 and we're like, you're up to date. You'll just need your flu shot when flu season's done. But right now you don't need any shots. I've seen like 17-year-olds like celebrate. They're like, yeah, right? Because kids want to have that connection in those doctor's visits, while not everything's about like poking you and giving you needles, right? So like having a well visit to be like, keep up the good work. Everything's great. You're healthy is really important.
So how do you feel about masking in school?
Yeah, so this is a question that I have been getting almost with every physical, right? And the interesting part is that I can't remember which Department of Health person that I heard say this, but she said it very eloquently. So masking, I feel like now, 3 years into the pandemic, is kind of like something that people should always have on hand, right? So like as a woman, I pack my purse full of random stuff that I probably don't need, right? So I put my wallet and and in every purse, every bag, there's a mask, right? Because we've seen that they've been useful, right? So whether you decide to send your child to school with or without a mask, I think that that's kind of a more complex, answer. But should your kid have a mask in their backpack at all times? I would say yes, because it doesn't harm you, right, to have it there. But I think it's helpful. It's protective to the community at large, right? It's protective to their classroom, to their teachers. All of my friends that are teachers, I tell them that, like if you're not going to be a mask wearer, at least keep one on you if you decide to put one on at any given time, because it's not just COVID, viruses spread. People get sick. If you get sick at school and you're able to like mask your child until you go pick them up, like think about how helpful that is to the other people that are around. And so what I've been telling my families, mask or not, it becomes a family decision, especially if they're vaccinated, if their vaccinations are up to date. But should you throw a mask in your child's backpack? Sure, there's no harm in doing that, because it actually might benefit them if they get sick, or if they find, if there's, I got a letter home last week about somebody in my daughter's class being sick. And so, it's very helpful to be like, oh, okay, we can throw on a mask real quick until I pick her up. So that's what I've been telling my families.
And it's also that time of year again when flu vaccinations are encouraged, and there's RSV.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been having, this is so funny because in 2019, I didn't have it. I've been having people like, is the flu shot in yet? Is the flu shot in yet? Right. And before we used to be like, can you get your flu shot? And they'd be like, oh, I'll wait till February. We're like, no, get it now. But all of my families who I've been doing physicals on, I would say a vast majority of them are like, can they get the flu shot yet? And I was like, oh, we usually get it around September, but check back in with me. We'll make a nurse visit. And so families are really being proactive about it, because I think, their kids not being out of school over, intermittently over these last few years really did affect the whole family dynamic, and parents are just really making sure that they're doing whatever they can to make sure that everyone's safe and their kids can stay in school.
That's quite interesting that people's perspectives have changed over the years.
Yeah. Like I said, it's kind of eye-opening. It took me by surprise when people were asking in August. I was like, no one ever asked for flu shot in August. This is great. Yeah.
Yeah, on social media, since I do the social media for Equal Hope, I see it all over the different CDC accounts encouraging people to get vaccinated, like pregnant people, and also parents and caregivers taking their kids in, or at least thinking about getting them vaccinated against the flu.
Yes, absolutely. I had my husband get vaccinated when I was pregnant with my kids. I was like, you got to go, because I'm pregnant and we got to make sure everyone's safe. So absolutely.
Yeah. So speaking about vaccination and masking, let's talk about basic hygiene tips. What should parents and caregivers be educating their teens on?
Yeah, so I think that this is something that probably has been drilled in our head more often than it has in the past. Probably the biggest thing is that when you're sick, just trying to contain your germs, right? So making sure, so just like a mask, especially if they're old enough to have or carry something with them, keep Kleenex in there, right? So that you're not, you see kids all the time wiping Kleenex or whatever, if you have, making sure that if you sneeze into your elbow or your hand, that you go wash it off. Hand sanitizer is like ubiquitous. Everyone has hand sanitizer, right? Most teachers have it at their desk. And so I've taught my daughter, like, okay, if you're trying to sneeze in your arm, but you miss it and you hit your, sneeze in your hand, make sure you're wiping it off. And again, this is just keeping everyone healthy. It's not just about COVID. It's just, making sure that we're protecting ourselves and protecting each other from getting each other sick if you don't have to be, right? So hand washing for sure. Making sure that they have Kleenex so they can actually sneeze and put mucus, whatever, into a Kleenex versus wiping it and whatever. And then staying home if you're sick, which I don't think people gave, like, it wasn't a thing that a lot of people did, I would say, before COVID. Like, they'd be like, oh, they got to go to school. I have to go to work. And so I think we do a better job, or we're trying to do a better job about, like, taking your recovery time seriously. So staying home when you're sick and then going back when you feel better. And so I've been reminding my parents of that. Like, they heal quicker if they're able to stay home and recover versus like just trying to push through every day. So,
And it also helps stop the spread too.
yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So besides book bags and what should be on you, what should be in the pantries, freezers, and refrigerators of homes so that children and teens are getting their vitamins and nutrients for their growth and development?
Oh my goodness. So this is probably a question that parents ask more often. The teenagers, because again, I see teenagers, they like roll their eyes. So young adulthood and teenagehood is one of those hard transitions as far as like dietary needs through life. And so parents ask all the time, should they be taking a vitamin? Should they be taking a vitamin? And so what I always say is, like, take 2 steps back, and without judging your kids, like eating habits, look at it nutritionally. Teenagers, they need, and young adults, and even like little kids, you need your balance of like vitamins and nutrients. So vitamin D, calcium, iron, all those things, vitamin C that you might have read about. If you feel, whether your kid is like a picky eater or whatever, that they're not getting a balance of these different things, starting a multivitamin is not a bad idea. Howsoever, if you feel like your kid has a pretty balanced diet, eats a little bit of every category, I think that that's good. So making sure that they have, so big ones as far as like kids that are in school, making sure they have some type of iron source, making sure they have some type of calcium. Vitamin D is like a big one, especially living in Chicago, right? Summertime's about to be over. It's about to be winter. Vitamin D levels generally fall when we're not outside. So making sure they're able to take that. For girls that have menstrual cycles that lose iron every month, I always talk about making sure that they're eating iron-enriched foods. So dark leaf vegetables, if they are, meat eaters, making sure they're eating that, beans, eggs, all the stuff that they frown at. And I go, if you're not eating that, we need to find another way to get your iron in. And maybe that might be taking a vitamin. And sometimes when I say it like that, they're like, well, I don't like beans and I don't like eggs. I was like, well, you need to take a multivitamin. And so that's what I remind families of. Like, okay, so these are kind of like the basic needs. This is not just this is for bone health. This is for to be able to concentrate, to be able to take tests, all those things that you don't necessarily connect with school, but it's all connected. What you eat, all the energy and the resources that you have, or nutrients that you have in your body, help you concentrate. And if you feel like your kids are not getting a balance of that, then maybe they should take a multivitamin.
And some other components that are important for having healthy and happy kids is exercising and also getting enough sleep every night.
I feel like this is a better conversation when they're little, right? So my kid, I say, go to bed. She like complains. And then I look up 2 seconds later, she's asleep, right? And then she gets up in the morning very happy and refreshed because it's been like 10 hours. But teenagers is not the same, right? So they like have their phone, parents are complaining, they're on their phone, whatever. And so what I really say is that as kids transition into preteens, adolescents, and young adults, really it is kind of like creating a compromise. And so I give all these spiels about sleep, right? So yes, we want their phone off, we want their electronics off. And then I look at the parent, I go, do you go to sleep without your phone? Do you turn your electronics off? Because sometimes it's leading by example. Okay, so if you can't do that, the blue light, it works very well. So it's not stimulating. If you have your phone on, most phones have a blue light function to it. And so you can dim it down so that it's not stimulating your brain to stay up. So I tell all my teens to put that function on so that it's ready for them to get enough sleep. Ideally, teenagers should be getting like close to 8 to 9 hours of sleep. Most of them are probably only getting 5 or 6. And so I kind of talk to them a lot about ways that they can do that. And the younger kids should be easily getting that much. And then making sure that they are kind of just getting into a routine to kind of like making sure that they are like, getting up at a certain time, going to bed at a certain time, especially while the school year is in. I think that that's really important. So I talk to families a lot about sleep hygiene and trying to just utilize it to the best of their ability. And, sometimes we achieve it, sometimes it takes a lot of years to work on it. Yeah.
Sleep is very important for your health now and then later in the future too.
Absolutely. I tell my kids that all the time.
So we have less than 5 minutes left. What I wanted to ask you is, how can parents and caregivers stay engaged with their children, especially if they're at that age where parents aren't cool and they want their privacy?
Yeah. Be okay not being cool and be okay having their privacy. No, I'm joking. So that partly is true. So part of it is true. So adolescents, as they get older, that journey of independence you want, right? And so a lot of times we get caught in this, like, you're too old to do this, and then you go, you're not old enough to do this, right? And teenagers are just like all confused. They're like, am I too old or am I too young? And so they kind of revolt. So first is being willing to allow your kid as a journey through preteen and adolescence to grow up. The other thing is engaging in their activity. So if you have a child that's getting older and they use social media and you don't understand it, they play video games that you don't know what it is, you have to be able, like, you might not like it. You might not like to play the game. You might not like the music that they like. You might not like being on social media, but if your kid is doing it, you need to know a little bit something about it, because that's how you're going to be able to speak to your child. When you say, all right, we haven't had spend any time together, and if you're going to sit down and play XXX video game, show me how to play. Is this the button that I push, right? Because kids are really surprised that you're willing to enter into their world, because a lot of adults, we don't. We say, that's you, this is me. And so I encourage families all the time, engage with your kid on their level and let them be the expert and teach you something about themselves.
Okay, just to wrap up, share with us how parents and caregivers and their children, how can they stay sane during the school year?
Take a deep breath and breathe. So that's been like my last line of every clinic visit this week. One step at a time, one day at a time, one foot in front of the other. You will make it through 5th grade, 4th grade, 6th grade, whatever. And so I just remind everybody to lean on each other. Remember that there's a solution to most of your problems, and if not, seek help. And so remember that you're in it together. You are a family unit. Support each other as you need it, and then make sure that you know what resources that you have available for you just in case hiccups arise. And that might be your medical provider. That might be people at your school.
How else can parents and givers achieve some balance, especially if kids are in all these extracurricular activities?
Right. And so I remind families of that too. Sometimes we have to reclaim balance because we have kind of become the society where we're like, go, 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 which is why eating and sleep has kind of been pushed to the side. And so probably the hardest conversation I have is with athletes that do sports year round, right? Because they love sports, it's protective. But just like any other thing, you need to rest, which is why we sleep at night. And so I usually am very direct with families when I say, okay, if you're on the go, you need to have an off season. If that's a couple weeks, you need to be able to rest your body. You need to be able to rest your mind. For families that are very academic, they need an off time, right? And so it really is just making sure that everyone is on board with taking a break and resetting. This is not a race. You will not lose time if you take a few weeks off of that sport or reading that or learning that new instrument. Rest is restorative, and sometimes we forget it. You come back better once you kind of like are able to reset yourself.
Okay. These have been such helpful and great tips, Dr. Scott-Wellington. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thanks. Well, thank you for tuning in tonight. Join us for our next show on Tuesday, September 26th from 5 to 5:25 p.m. We will be talking with Dr. Victoria Barbosa from the University of Chicago. And don't forget to follow us on social media, equalhope_IL. If you want to learn more about Equal Hope, events, and our services, give us a call at 312-942-3368. You can also visit us at equalhope.org. Thank you.